Leave heads and cold iron collar under the bottom we crawl. Heavy, the clock stopped ticking now. Silence, buried deep under the frost.
In the year 30 AD, the Roman Empire stood as the most powerful force the world had ever known. And yet, in one of its most volatile provinces, something invisible was beginning to threaten its control. Not an army, not a rebellion, not a king with banners and soldiers, but a man with no weapons, no official authority, and no territory to defend. And yet, within a matter of days, this man would become so dangerous that both religious leaders and imperial power would quietly agree on one thing: he had to be stopped. The question is, how does someone with no army become a political threat to the most powerful empire on earth? And more importantly, what did those in power see that most people today still don't? Because the threat Jesus represented was not obvious. It didn't march through streets or clash on battlefields. It spread through ideas. And ideas, when they take root, can dismantle systems far more effectively than war ever could. To understand this, we need to step into Judea under Roman rule, a region where tension was not an occasional event, but a constant reality. Rome governed through dominance, but also through fear. Crucifixions lined roads as warnings. Rebellions were crushed before they could grow. Stability was not negotiated, it was enforced. And yet, beneath this imposed order, unrest simmered. The Jewish population lived with a deep sense of identity, history, and expectation. They were not just another conquered people, they believed themselves chosen. And within that belief existed a powerful anticipation, the arrival of a Messiah. Not a spiritual figure, as later interpretations would frame him, but for many at that time, a political liberator, a king who would overthrow oppression and restore sovereignty. Rome understood this, and anything that resembled that expectation was immediately dangerous. This is where Jesus enters the stage. At first, he does not look like the threat Rome would typically respond to. He is not gathering weapons. He is not forming alliances with militant groups. Instead, he speaks, he teaches, he tells stories that seem simple but carry implications that ripple through the structure of society. He speaks of a kingdom but insists it is not of this world. And that is where the confusion begins. Because if it is not of this world, why are so many people listening? Why are crowds forming? Why are people beginning to question the very systems that govern their lives? Influence, especially when it grows quietly, is unpredictable, and unpredictability is something power cannot tolerate. The religious leaders, particularly the Sanhedrin, were the first to recognize the deeper implications. Their authority was built on interpretation, tradition, and structure. They acted as intermediaries between the people and God, but also as stabilizers within the Roman system. Their position depended on balance. Too much unrest, and Rome would intervene. Too little control, and their authority would collapse. Jesus disrupted both sides of that balance. He spoke directly to the people, bypassing the structures that gave these leaders power. He challenged interpretations publicly, exposing inconsistencies. And, most dangerously, he reframed authority itself. He suggested that power did not come from position, but from truth. That idea alone was enough to destabilize everything. But what made the situation even more complex was how different groups perceived him. To some, he was a teacher. To others, a prophet. To a growing number, possibly something more. And that something more was the problem, because ambiguity creates space for projection. And in a politically charged environment, people project what they want to see. Some saw a savior, others saw a king. and Rome saw a potential uprising waiting to happen. Patterns began to emerge. Jesus would enter cities and draw crowds almost immediately. He would speak in ways that challenged both religious and social hierarchies, and yet he never explicitly called for rebellion. This created a dilemma. There was no clear charge that could justify immediate action, but there was growing evidence of influence that could not be ignored. This is where pressure begins to build, quietly at first. Discussions behind closed doors, questions that have no easy answers. How do you stop someone who is not breaking any laws, but is slowly undermining the entire system? How do you control an idea? And perhaps the most unsettling question, what happens if you don't act in time? As Passover approached, the tension intensified. Jerusalem filled with pilgrims, emotions heightened, and the memory of past deliverance from oppression was at the forefront of every mind. This was not just a religious festival, it was a reminder, a dangerous one, because it reinforced the idea that oppression could end. And into that atmosphere, Jesus entered the city, publicly, intentionally. Crowds gathered, voices rose. Some began to refer to him in ways that could not be ignored. The symbolism was unmistakable, and symbolism in a city on edge can ignite reality. For Rome, this was a critical moment. The empire had seen this pattern before: charismatic figures, growing movements, escalating expectations. It always led to the same place: rebellion. And rebellion had to be crushed before it began. But here, the situation was not straightforward. Jesus was not organizing an uprising. There were no weapons, no battle plans, no declarations of war. And yet, everything about the moment felt like the beginning of something that could spiral out of control. The religious leaders faced a different kind of fear. Not immediate rebellion, but long-term loss of authority. If people began to follow Jesus, to believe his interpretation over theirs, their entire system would erode. And once authority erodes, it rarely returns. So two different fears from two different powers began to align. Rome feared instability, the religious leaders feared irrelevance, and in the space where those fears overlapped, a decision began to form. But the execution of that decision required precision. Timing had to be perfect. Public opinion had to be managed. A mistake could turn Jesus into exactly what they feared most: a martyr. And that is where the situation becomes even more intricate. Because removing a threat is not just about action, it is about perception. The narrative had to be controlled. Charges had to be framed in a way that justified intervention. Before the religious council, Jesus could be accused of blasphemy, but that meant nothing to Rome. Before Pilate, he had to become something else: a political figure, a king, a rival. And so the narrative began to shift, carefully, intentionally, shaped to fit the audience that would ultimately decide his fate. And then, Judas, a figure that raises more questions than answers. His role provided access, timing, certainty, but it also suggests something deeper, that by the time Judas acted, the outcome was already in motion. He did not create the situation, he accelerated it. And as the final hours approached, everything moved with a strange sense of inevitability. The last meal, the quiet tension, words spoken that carried weight beyond the moment. And then, the night, Gethsemane, a place removed from the noise, yet central to everything that followed. The arrest itself was precise, controlled, almost too efficient. No chaos, no resistance in the expected sense. And then something unexpected. Jesus does not resist. He does not attempt to escape. He accepts. And in doing so, he alters the dynamic entirely. Because power understands conflict. It understands opposition. But it does not easily understand surrender that is chosen, not forced. And that creates a deeper problem. Because now eliminating the threat is no longer enough. It must be justified, explained, made acceptable. And that leads to what follows. But by then, the real decision had already been made.
The threat Jesus represented was never about military power. It was about something far more disruptive, a shift in how people understood authority, truth, and control. He did not seek to overthrow Rome, but his presence made people question why Rome ruled at all. He did not dismantle the religious system directly, but he made people wonder if they needed it. And those kinds of questions are the most dangerous of all, because once they begin, they do not stop. The consequences of that moment would extend far beyond what anyone involved could have predicted. What began as a localized concern in a small province would grow into a movement that outlived empires. Rome, in its attempt to maintain control, may have set into motion something it could never fully contain. And that is the paradox at the heart of this story, that in trying to eliminate a threat, systems sometimes amplify it, that in attempting to silence an idea, they give it a platform, and that the most powerful forces in history are not always armies or empires, but beliefs that refuse to disappear. So when we look back at this moment, the question is not simply what happened, it is what was understood by those in power that made them act, because they saw something dangerous, something worth stopping, and whether they were right or wrong, their decision changed the course of history. If